Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Indiana State Police Roadshow. I am your host, Sergeant John Perrine, Public Information Officer for the Indianapolis District. The Roadshow is brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance and Cops for Kids, a subsidiary of the State Police Alliance. For more information about our sponsor, you can visit www.indianasfinest.com. As always, with every other week, the man behind the camera who's visually bringing us to you is Tom Trial. Thanks for all Tom's efforts to get us on YouTube each and every week. Our guest today, very special guest, long time in the making, been trying to get him on the show, is Sergeant DJ Sheff from the Carmel Police Department. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we're not here necessarily to talk about the Carmel Police Department. We're talking a bigger picture because you have a different role. And what is that role?
I'm the first vice president of the National Association of School Resource Officers, or NASRO, is what we...
That's right. So if you've never heard of school resource officer or what they do, today that's what we're going to talk about is what is a school resource officer, what is their role, maybe their perceived role and their actual role, because throughout the state of Indiana, schools are coming on board with SROs, and it's very, very important role. So you have been an SRO in the Carmel school systems for how long now?
For 11 years.
11 years. And you've seen it grow tremendously. So talk about that growth right now from where it was 11 years ago to where it is today.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, obviously the media attention that happens along with any sort of crisis that occurs in a school setting, obviously some of the major ones that are out there draws attention and draws an interest of what's the benefit of having someone in the school setting that is also a police officer. It kind of draws a lot more attention to it. So we've seen a lot of growth in the state of Indiana and across the country on that.
Yeah, and how important is it? Because when you and I were in high school, middle school, if you saw a police officer in the building, you just assumed somebody brought some weed to school or something, right? It wasn't because they were there full time, and that has evolved tremendously in the last 20 years. Yeah,
I mean, that's even evolved, even in our own district. You know, early on, I remember talking to parents that would be there for an evening function, and they'd say, gosh, is this school that bad that we need to have a police officer? Yeah. And, of course, we're progressing into understanding the role a lot more and understanding that it's not the law enforcement side of it really is a very small aspect of what we do. The bigger aspect of it and the foundation behind the school resource officer job is to build positive relationships with the youth in our community. And we see that when we do that, we see that come to benefit not just the students, but the parents of the students and the entire community. So it kind of changes that climate of the community when it's done effectively.
Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point there because it did seem like early on the perception of kind of that mindset was, oh, geez, this school must not be good. There's police officers at this basketball game. To now, if you go to a ball game and you don't see a police officer, you're thinking, well, what's wrong?
Yeah, well, our communities have an expectation of being safe in all aspects. And the school, of course, that's our most precious commodity. Our greatest asset is the youth in our communities. And they're our future, and you can fill in the blank there. So we need to make sure that they're safe. But we also need to make sure that we're building relationships to give them mentors and positive adult relationships for them to be able to seek out and find some guidance in life, which we know statistically that is great benefit for our youth to have someone outside of the family that's a positive mentor.
Yeah, and you bring up some great things. And we were talking earlier how you can't quantitate the success of this. It's impossible. But being a school resource officer is so much more than just being a police officer. You're maybe 20% police officer and 80% school administrator or teacher or whatever you have.
So what our organization does, we train, and that's the key point behind it is getting the right person in the job. Just like any specialty in law enforcement, not everyone in law enforcement is suited for the position of a school resource officer. The truth behind it is it takes a special person, and it is a specialty, and it also requires some very special training to make sure that we understand aspects of the teen brain, aspects of violence and victimization, special education, all the different dynamics that go on in an educational environment. But we train on what we call a triad concept, which is we do have the law enforcement foundation. That's the basis of who we are. That's what we are. And if we have to respond in a reactive role, we will do that. Most of the law enforcement stuff is done ahead of time. It's working with administration on school safety functions, setting up instant action plans for major events, establishing guidelines and policies inside the school to help harden the target, if you will. So that's an element of law enforcement that's not generally a visible element. And the second aspect of that is we try to get into classrooms and do some presentations. And what we find is when we get in the classroom and we talk about a variety of different topics, can be law related, can be related to just knowledge that we have based off our own personal experience. That builds a relationship, gives us an opportunity to build relationships with kids. The third aspect of it that we train on is what we call the informal counselor or mentor. That is an element that our kids need in this society today, is someone outside of the home that is independent of the home, that has an opportunity to help guide them and direct them. I can't tell you how many times I've had parents tell me, I've been trying to tell my son or daughter that for years, and you tell him one time and all of a sudden he gets it. Well, that happens. That's for all of us, because we know that the value of that outside adult mentor is huge.
Yeah. And, those relationships with those kids, you shoulder the burden kind of breaking down some of those barriers between children and law enforcement, because unfortunately in our profession, sometimes when we deal with children, it's not always in a positive light. An arrest is being made or something tragic has happened, and they often relate that tragedy or that arrest to this uniform. Right. And so sometimes you have a challenge to get through to some of, especially younger kids, and say, hey, we're the good guys. We're here to help.
Well, and the great benefit of the SRO program is, even if we do have to take law enforcement action on a juvenile inside a school, chances are pretty good in the next couple of days we're probably going to come across that same student in the hallway. And what our passion is to re-engage with that student and help them understand, how can I help you be successful moving forward? You made a mistake. There's consequences for our decisions in lives. Now, how do I help you make that decision to move forward and progress? The other part of it is sometimes we have the ability to, our discretion comes with knowledge that's different than what it does from a general road officer, because we know the child, we know the family, we know some of the dynamics and some of the challenges that individual student is dealing with in life. That may impact whether or not we take law enforcement action. We might refer them in different fashions because we know what's going on in their life. So that relationship piece is enormous for us to be able to help our kids be successful.
And that's why it's so important. You talked about how it takes a special person to be an SRO. A lot of retired police officers think, hey, that's a good position for me. But if you're on the brink of retirement, or maybe you are retired and you're thinking you're going to go be a school security guard, then rethink, because that's not what this is about.
Right. Yeah. That's, in fact, I would argue that that is a detriment to the program and a detriment to the school if you have someone who is not properly selected to be in that position. Look, in law enforcement, we always look for other opportunities to supplement income, and I get that. And certainly at retirement, we're looking for something to be able to do to make a difference. And there's many who have been fantastic, retired from a law enforcement career, gotten into a school environment, and been successful. We just need to make sure that those people are the right people being put in that, not just for the purpose of sitting and waiting for something to happen.
Right.
Although there's a benefit to that as a security guard, that's not the ultimate goal. And again, I think it diminishes what the role is all about.
Yeah, and so when people finally buy in to safety protocols, SROs, and school security, it overall enhances the security, but it's taken time. It's a paradigm shift. When we were in school, the locked doors weren't something you thought of. School resource officers, lockdown drills, all these things that happen, and finally 20 years later, if you're not securing your school and hiring SROs, you're behind the curve a little.
Right. Well, again, our communities expect our kids to be safe, and as they should. And, the progress of this, and a lot of this comes from the right training and the right understanding of being and what the relationship means between a local school district and a local law enforcement agency, or any law enforcement agency, to be able to build those relationships. We see a climate in the school, training staff, training administrators, and helping them better understand what school safety is all about. The great thing in Indiana that I think is hands down one of the best programs in the country is the Indiana School Safety Specialist Academy. Yeah. That's an avenue where police officers, school resource officers, and school officials are training together and having a better understanding of school safety. How do we make it a safe environment? It's a balance. How do we make it a safe environment? But we also need to make sure it's still a warm educational environment for our kids to learn in. But we know that the foundation is, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to learn well. Yeah,
and it is. And it's difficult because you don't want to turn our schools into prisons. Right. You don't want them to feel like so you walk this, and the technology's there, and a lot of schools, the infrastructure is there, and when you build a new school for enhanced security, but it's more also about the parents buying in. I know it's not convenient to swipe your driver's license or scan or sign in or just to take your kid to a doctor's appointment.
Right.
But as soon as everybody buys into that, everybody's safer.
Yeah, it does take time to establish that culture in the community,
Yeah.
And people understand that. It could be something simple. A lot of times people worry about how much security you put in to make sure that it doesn't feel like it's a confined space. It's this prison-like environment. But, some of the things that we bring into the table are something very simple for a safety change, locking a classroom door.
Yeah.
No one sees that. And the inconvenience of that is maybe a student runs to the bathroom, comes back, we have to open the door for that student to come back in. That's a small inconvenience for an overall safety that's tremendous. And the visitor sign-in procedures, all of those things are, and again, on the front end, generally anything with change, we've got a little bit of a hiccup to it. But over a period of time, and you help people understand the why behind the change, it's another avenue that we have the opportunity to do, to get in front of parents and share with them why we're making some of the changes we're doing, what are we doing, why are we here, and it really helps establish the climate.
Yeah. So let's talk about the day, a school day for you, for an SRO. Is do you wear a police uniform daily? Are you in a polo shirt or?
Yeah, our agency, we wear uniforms, but there are some agencies that will wear soft uniforms, polos and so forth, just kind of community specific and make their own decisions. And there are some arguments to say that softer uniform helps lessen the impact a little bit, but also there's the argument of saying that it's our job to help kids feel comfortable around the full uniform.
Yeah, so I can see both sides.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Both sides come out. So it varies. Every community is a little bit different, and but ultimately what we do is we're in the hallways during passing periods, before school, after school, wandering around saying hello to kids. And if you were to watch a school resource officer working effectively on a day-to-day basis, what you're going to find is there's a lot of social interaction with students.
A lot of high fives, a lot of smiles,
high fives, a lot of fist bumps, a lot of because that relationship piece is, as I've said, is the foundation of what we do.
And what I think we talked about earlier too is when a child does break a rule or break a law and you do have to intervene, it's not just about, hey, here's your ticket, you're going in handcuffs, whatever it may be. It's, how can I help you? Like, here's the issue. Here's what you've done wrong. There's going to be consequences for that. But let's move past that and let's look to the future. And that's an important role that you have.
Absolutely. It's about building attitude, behavior, and character, which I've stolen from a book. It's called Have a New Kid by Friday. But it's a great book that just kind of talks about how do we develop our youth's attitude, behavior, and character. And for us, we might even, although we don't get involved with school discipline, that's not our role. We don't dole out punishment, detentions or anything of that nature. That's not our role. But if someone is violating a policy that's just a school policy, it's not a legal issue, it still is beneficial for us as adult mentors to help them try to make the right decision and follow the policy that's in place, whether they're not supposed to be in a particular hallway during lunch. That conversation with them and helping that character is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key to our future, I think, is we don't want history to repeat ourselves. And so for so many years, we put handcuffs on people and then we were done as law enforcement. And it's time to step over that hurdle and coach them through the future.
That's right. Consequences themselves, we're finding by studies that just consequences are, people going into jails and so forth. That in and of itself is not always sufficient to help, people make better decisions in the future. And certainly at a juvenile level, with the brain development as it is, we've got to help our kids make those decisions and help develop the frontal brain, to be honest with you. And that's a part of the process that is often misunderstood about the SRO, is that we have that opportunity more so really than an educator does in most cases, because they have a curriculum to make sure that they present and fulfill their expectations.
Yeah. So we have about 45 seconds. So if there's somebody out there listening that is an SRO, wants to be an SRO, or a school that employs one, what are some resources they have to get training, to get mentorship from people like you?
Sure. Well, anyone can ever reach out to me. I'm happy to help anyone as far as establishing that career. I often joke when I teach classes for NASRO, I tell retired, or almost just retired officers, what are you going to feel like when you have you found out that when you retired, you found the greatest form of law enforcement you've ever worked in your life? I pose that question because it is. Yeah. It is an amazing form of law enforcement. It's so rewarding to watch our kids be successful. It's fantastic. But obviously, we as an organization, as NASRO.org, is a great opportunity for people to come, and we train SROs all over the world. We're about to have a conference down in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee next week. About 2,300 SROs from across the world are coming together, and we're going to train and continue to train SROs for success.
Excellent. Well, thank you for tuning in. You're our guest, DJ Schiff from the Carmel Police Department. Roadshow is out.